Here from Warren Schreiber and Bob Freidrich, representing the President's Co-op Council.
Thank you, Mike, for having this meeting. My name is Bob Freidrich. I am the president of Glen Oaks Village. It is the largest co-op in New York, but I know Clearview very well. I grew up in Clearview. I went to school in 209, and most of my life was in Clearview Gardens. You know, this year, we're in the middle of the worst real estate decline, and not just in a generation, in generations. The worst real estate decline in generations. And we're being told by the commissioner that our valuations have gone up. In Glen Oaks, 86%. In La Havre, 122%. In Clearview, 100%. And the commissioner, this is only in New York, and the commissioner tells us, you know what? We're going to cap it at 50%. And we're supposed to say thank you in the middle of the worst real estate decline in a generation. He's pulling numbers out of a hat. It's the worst government that I have ever seen. I mean, it's an absolute disgrace. And tonight we have the smoking gun of how flawed their system is. Because there's no way you can justify these types of increases. So, how does the process work? And when I get done, it'll take me a couple of minutes, but you will understand how we got here and what the Department of Finance did. In New York City, if you're a co-op, and if the co-op was built before 1974, the co-op is assessed as if it's a rental property, which we all know it's not. But according to the law, the city has to assess it as if it's a rental property. Now, the Department of Finance, and I'm an accountant, by the way, so I understand their calculations and their computations. It's very complex. But what they do, to do that, to assess it as a rental property, they have to go out and find what they call comparable properties. Now, what's a comparable property? We all know what that is. It's a property that perhaps is in the same location, a property similar in size, a property similar in building age. You know, Glen Oaks was built in 47, Clearview was built in 52, I believe. A building that's the construction type is similar, and a building that is defined by the Department of Finance in a category as a co-op. So those are the things that constitute a comparable building. So the city goes out and tries to find these hypothetical, imaginary buildings. And when they find those buildings, and by the way, if the building was built before 74, it has to be a building that has rent-regulated tenants in it. So what the Department of Finance does, it goes around, it finds these hypothetical buildings, and then figures out what the rent roll is. And then it takes that rent roll and divides it by the square footage, and now has a gross rent per gross square foot. It takes that number, then applies it to your co-op, and does a bunch of other things, and comes out with a valuation. That's how the process works. And Frankel is the one who controls that process. Now, that process is a process that we've lived with all along. And it's been working in the past somewhat. But the process is not objective. It's subjective, which means it can be error-prone and susceptible to errors by the Department of Finance auditors, errors that the commissioner will not acknowledge. Now, I'm going to show you some things of what they did. And when they put up these comparables, I did an unbelievable analysis. I know Glen Oaks Village, so I figured let me start off with Glen Oaks Village and see what we got. And I couldn't believe it. I could not believe what I saw. And I'm going to take you through that right now. Now, a lot of you can't see this in the back, so I'm going to explain it to you. Hey, Warren, give me a hand. Just hold this one up. So what we have here, you can't see the picture clearly. I'm going to...
I knew it would come in useful.
This is Glen Oaks Village. It looks exactly like Clearview Gardens. Exactly. And this is the selections that they did last year. We had no problem with the Department of Finance selections. So they went out and they said, let me find a comparable to Glen Oaks Village. And this was last year. And they found 3 garden apartments that if you didn't know the area and you close your eyes and you went there, you would think you're in Glen Oaks, you would think you're in Clearview. Exactly the same. And when we looked at these rent rolls, They were very similar to, because in Glen Oaks we still have some rent stabilized tenants. So the rent rolls were very, very similar. We had no problem. Target property, Glen Oaks, all garden apartments, no problem. This year, you would think, use the same comps. Now, this is the first year the city implemented a new system, according to testimony that the commissioner gave to the city council. First time they used this new system to come up with these comparables. And don't forget, this is the most important process to get to these valuations. So, I go through the list, everything in red. These are the objective criteria of what a comparable is. Nothing is comparable. Glen Oaks Village, the first property, and I have a larger picture here actually, the first property they used, if you know the area, it's on Douglas, it's G. Dardino's restaurant, Douglaston Parkway and Northern Boulevard. Now, does that look like Clearview Gardens to you? It doesn't look like Clearview to me. They used a commercial property. Then they went to a property on Hillside Avenue and 263rd Street, a property with a parking lot, a commercial building. Use that property. They then went to 3 other properties, because what they did in Glen Oaks, they used 5 properties for their comparables. All commercial properties, and in fact, 2 of those commercial properties on the Department of Finance list was listed as a co-op. So even their data is wrong. You know, garbage in, garbage out. This is what they did. And I said to myself, I must be doing something wrong. It can't be this bad. And they made it even more difficult because the comparables they put online this year, they left off the second part of the address.